Hey, welcome back to JG3 Reviews, where we explore the world of fountain pens, ink, and paper. Today we're going to look at Rohrer Klingner's Verdigris, a blue-black with just a touch of teal to it every now and then. I think you're going to like this one. It's a very reasonably priced ink, so I will show you how it performed on various papers. We'll do a water fastness test, see if it can handle getting caught out in the rain, and I'll show you some chromatography results and give you my recommendation on Rohrer Klingner Verdigris. Now, the pen I've used for the ink test today is an Asvine V126, a vacuum-filled pen with a number 6 extra fine nib. And I can tell you that in this pen, the ink has performed very well, no issues in the function of the pen, and it's really been a nice, suitable match. As always, we'll start here with Clairefontaine paper. This is a grid pad, and I like to use this for our dry times and the water fastness test, and it looks really good on this paper. No feathering issues here. There's some nice shading, as you can see from the wetness test. This is a pretty wet pen for an extra fine, and I think you'll see that reflected on each of these papers. And you can see very clearly here that the ink is basically a blue-black with that hint of a teal green, hence the name Verdigris. When you open up the cap, you get a little bit of insight into the dark blue-blackness of this ink. I think that's a really pretty color there on the inside of the cap, but I have that off so that we can do a fresh swatch here on the Clairefontaine. So here's the first pass, and here you can see where there is, a little bit of a teal tint to that blue-black. Go for a second pass, and a good wet third pass. That's also a good test. That third pass, if anything's going to get through the paper, it's that. Now, we'll come back to this after it's dried, but already you can get an idea of the shading of the ink. I also want to show you here on Tomoe river paper, the old Tomoe river paper. And here you can see that in the writing, that extra fine nib brings out more the darkness, although you can see shading at the top of the R, in that K, in that V, and it shades well on Tomoe river. Here in the swatch, you can see that as well, and see that basically you are getting a blue-black ink with a hint of personality. Next is this dot grid paper from Walmart. This is Pen and Gear paper from Walmart. It's made in India. Really great performing paper. It's not a high-end paper or anything like that. It's really quite affordable, a couple bucks for a notebook, but it performs really well with fountain pen inks. And here, I think the shading on this paper is actually better than it was on the Tomoe river. You can really see the lighter shades of this ink. No bleed through whatsoever. And that's as much a function of this paper. It is really low bleed through paper. It performs great that way. We'll see something different here with copy paper. This is Hammermill, just basic garden variety Hammermill paper. And here you see that the pen wrote a much wetter line. It dries very quickly, but it also feathers. This paper just soaks it up like a sponge and brings it right on through to the other side. So on copy paper, you want to use this at work on forms or something like that, I'm probably not going to recommend that. Now here we have Irreful paper. I reviewed this paper recently, and it performed really well with a lot of pens and inks, and so I decided to start including this. So here you have, again, a little bit broader line from that extra fine. I would say the same is true of this medium down here, and you do get really good shading. No sheening or anything like that. This little dot, by the way, is on the upstroke. That extra fine just poked right through that paper. I have not had that happen before with this paper or with that pen. So, whatever, user error, I don't know. I didn't have anything under the paper, and it's a little bit of a soft surface. But the ink, I think, performed well, and so did the paper. That's where that tore through, but you notice no bleed through here and no feathering. What about a Yush paper? Well, with a Yush, I forgot what order I write things in there, but in a Yush you get shading yet again. I think that looks good. There's no feathering whatsoever. Now, I wrote that really small, so it might look like it wrote a broad line, but it really didn't. And no real issues on the back side. A lot of you use Rhodia paper, and the ink is going to look really good on it. Like Clairefontaine, a little bit darker, but still lots of variation. And it sits on the surface for a second, so you get a really wet swipe there, even out of an extra fine. And then last up is a True Red composition notebook with paper made in Vietnam. You can find variations of this notebook in lots of big box stores in the U.S., and it generally performs pretty well. And I think you get really nice shading here. Again, a nice clean line. There's no feathering issue there like there was on the copy paper, and it looks to me quite good. There was just a bit of ghosting and almost bleed through. Nothing got here on the other side, but definitely some ghosting. Now back to that Clairefontaine, that swatch has pretty much dried, and you can see here on that third pass, really, really dark. It's quite dark on the second, but really dark on the third pass there. But I think representative of what you see in several of these letters in the darker spots. It did not, even as wet as it was, go through the Clairefontaine. Now again, that's largely the paper that did such a great job there, because you will find that this ink does ghost and bleed through certain papers. But overall, I find it quite well behaved. All right, how about we do some dry times? Keeping track today will be a vintage 90s Citizen pen I picked up for less than the price of some ink bottles. We'll start out with our 5-second test. And, of course, still quite wet. 15 seconds. And that's still pretty wet. 30 seconds. That's still quite wet, isn't it? Let's try a minute. Wow. And at 1 minute, it is just about dry. So, gonna take the full minute. We're gonna call that a wet ink. All right, let's see. I don't remember this ink making any claims of water fastness or anything like that, but we'll check it out anyway. All right, let's dab that up and see what the results are. Oh, I think you can probably already tell that's not going to be a signing ink, is it? That's not water fast at all. You could probably clean that paper up and use it again. All right, well that's officially answered that question. Let me talk about the bottle for a second, because bottles actually are maybe more important than we sometimes think in ink. This one has a really nice wide mouth, so any fountain pen that you're going to use, even some giant Ranga pen, is going to fit inside this bottle. And that's really important, because there are plenty of bottles out there that you actually cannot, even if you want to, fill from the bottle. For those who might wonder, it does say that it's useful for fountain pens, steel nibbed pens, dip pens, and individual writing utensils for calligraphy. And it is important, by the way, to check that if it's a new ink to you or a new manufacturer, because not all pens and inks are compatible. And sometimes you're at an art or craft supply store and you see what looks like a bottle of really cool ink, and you do not want to put that in your fountain pen. So I like it when they put on the bottle whether or not it's actually usable that way. And that bottle does hold 50 milliliters of ink, and at the current price in the U.S. of $12, that comes out to $7.10 per ounce. I know some of you like to know the per ounce price. I bought mine from Cult Pens in the UK for $6.15 quite a while back. In fact, even this test page was written months ago, and at that time, that came out to $3.64 per ounce. I like Cult Pens, even though you had to pay more for shipping, because there are certain inks like Rohrer Klingner or Diamine that I can get there so much cheaper that if I save up a list and order them all at once, it's definitely worth buying from the UK versus the US in that case. You can see here, I paid about half. And just in case you couldn't tell by all the writing on that bottle, this Schreibtinte was made in Germany. All right, I know some of you have been anxious for the chromatography, and here it is. And it is pretty interesting. Not as dynamic as some chromatographies turn out to be, but interesting nonetheless. You can see that this blue-black ink does indeed have some really dark blue and some black. And then you come down into some yellow right in there, and there's that pinkish hue, which you often see in various blues, especially blues that have a bit of shading, and then it all kind of fades out there at the very end. You can see right in there that there is that little bit of a greenness to the tint, but it's definitely mostly black and blue, and both of those really intense right up here at the edge of the chromatography test. So overall, what do I think? I think it's a great blue-black. It's an interesting ink. It comes from a great company with a long history. They've been working on this stuff since 1892. That's a long time to get to know what you're doing. And I think it's a really good ink. And listen, at $6.15 a bottle, if you can catch that deal, This is a really reasonably priced ink that I think looks really great on most paper. Just be aware that there are some papers that it's not going to like all that much. And if you like these ink reviews, be sure to subscribe so you know when the next one is coming out. And here's a hint, it's going to be real soon. And thank you for watching. God bless you, and I hope you have a great week.